Welcome to The Explainer. Now, when we think of the ancient Buddha Sangha, we usually picture this incredibly serene, quiet group of wandering ascetics, right? Just deeply immersed in meditation, totally detached from the material world. But the historical reality? Actually, it was vastly different, and honestly, a whole lot more relatable. As we're going to see today, the early monastic community wasn't just this ethereal spiritual group. It evolved into a massive, complex, living system that required constant, highly practical problem solving. Because, it turns out, managing thousands of monks is a logistical nightmare of epic proportions.
Okay, let's dive right into how this all went down. First, we'll look at the debate over who the true elder really is. Then trace the evolution from sleeping under trees to massive monasteries. We'll meet Elder Siddhartha and his famous purchase at Jetavana. See how they solved some pretty intense distribution conflicts. And finally, look at their surprisingly fine-grained management systems.
So, part one, who is the true elder? Okay, so every organization needs a hierarchy, right? And the early Buddhist monks were absolutely no different. When the community first started really growing, they ran into a remarkably basic human problem. Literally, who gets the first sip of water? I mean, they were legitimately arguing over who deserved to sit first at gatherings and who should get the first serving of food. Now, it sounds a little petty, but to them, this was a serious philosophical debate. Some of the monks were arguing, hey, I was born into the royal Kshatriya caste or a high-ranking Brahmin family, so I should go first. Others pushed back, saying spiritual achievement should be the metric. Like, shouldn't a fully enlightened arhat get priority over a regular everyday monk? It was total confusion and a whole lot of stepping on toes. To settle this, the Buddha didn't just hand down a dry, boring lecture. Instead, he told this really charming animal fable. He described three animals, an elephant, a monkey, and a partridge, all arguing over who was the seniormost under this massive pipala tree. The elephant claimed seniority because, well, when he was a baby, he could just walk right over the tree and it rubbed his belly. But then the monkey chimes in, well, when I was little, I could sit on the ground and bend its top. But, spoiler alert, the partridge won the debate. Why? Because the partridge had eaten the fruit of an entirely different tree and dropped the seed via its droppings to plant this very tree in the first place. No way around that one. So the animals decided to respect each other purely based on who had been around the longest.
The Buddha actually used this fable to establish a beautifully simple rule for the monks: seniority by ordination time. It didn't matter if you used to be a literal king, or if you were hands down the most spiritually advanced monk in the room. If someone was ordained as a fully fledged monk even one single second before you, they were your senior. This was a massive game changer. It completely leveled the playing field, just stripping caste and subjective spiritual bragging right out of the equation. It gave them a totally clear, undeniable baseline for harmony.
Moving on to part two, the evolution from trees to monasteries.
So, with the social hierarchy finally settled, the community faced an even bigger physical challenge, which was coming indoors. Initially, the Buddha's followers just slept outside under trees or in caves, but as wealthy lay people began building actual physical shelters for them, an absolute logistical nightmare began. Now, what's really fascinating about this incredibly pragmatic, almost comedic trial and error process is just how the rules evolved. The monks moved indoors, slept on the floor, and immediately, started getting bitten by snakes and aggressive bugs. So naturally, they complained to the Buddha, and he authorized the use of raised beds. But then the hardwood hurt their backs, so he authorized soft mattresses stuffed with grass, wool, and leaves.
But as you can probably guess, every single solution created a brand new problem. It triggered this hilarious domino effect of ancient troubleshooting. It's like a giant puzzle. First, the new buildings had no doors, right? So wandering cows and monkeys would just wander right in. The solution? Install doors. But simple doors meant thieves could sneak in and steal the monks' begging bowls. Okay, solution? Add locks, pins, and peepholes. Problem solved, right? Well, with the doors locked shut, the rooms became pitch black. So the solution to that was to cut out windows. But open windows meant that super loud peacocks, parrots, and geese would fly inside and squawk all day, completely ruining the monks' silent meditation. It's just an incredible look at how practical, everyday nuisances literally shaped the rules of a major world religion.
All right, Section 3, Elders Siddhartha and Jetavana. As the community grew more organized, it started attracting staggering amounts of support from wealthy laypeople. Take this one layman in particular, Sudatta, who is famously known as Anathapindika. Sudatta was this incredibly wealthy merchant who wanted to build a massive, peaceful sanctuary for the Buddha in the city of Shravasti. And he actually found the perfect spot. It was a quiet, lush park without any poisonous bugs or loud noises. But there was a catch. It belonged to Prince Jeddah. When Sudata asked to buy it, the prince essentially scoffed at him and gave him a ridiculous quote. He said, "I will not sell it unless you cover the ground with gold." He was basically giving him a polite royal no way. But Sudata was absolutely not deterred. He literally brought out carts of gold coins and just began covering the ground side by side until the prince, who was utterly shocked by this level of devotion, finally agreed to the sale and even chipped in himself. And just to put the sheer scale of this project into perspective, 16. Sudata didn't just buy the land, he funded the construction of 16 massive multi-story pavilions, complete with warm rooms, dining halls, and 60 cave dwellings. The Sangha had officially hit the big time. They weren't just wandering anymore, they were operating mega complexes.
Which brings us to part 4, solving Sangha distribution conflicts. Because as you can imagine, with massive mega monasteries and wealthy donors providing endless streams of beds, food, and medicine, human nature inevitably took over, and chaos ensued. Enter the notorious 6-group monks. These guys were a clique of opportunistic monks who constantly, and I mean constantly, found loopholes in the system. When new, beautiful rooms were built, they would literally sprint ahead of the elder monks to claim the best beds. When wealthy donors brought massive vats of food, these specific monks would stand right at the front gates, intercepting the donors before they even got inside. They'd demand all the premium treats for themselves, the thickest sesame porridge, the honey, the ghee, the sweet pastries, and then have the audacity to tell the donors to take the thin, watery soup inside to the elders.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the Buddha solved the crisis. He didn't just sit them down and tell them to be nicer. No, he invented a strict, specialized monastic bureaucracy. He created official titles to manage the chaos. You had the manager of porridge, who ensured all 8 different types of porridge were distributed equitably. The manager of pastries handled the sweets. The manager of beds meticulously assigned rooms based on that exact seniority rule we talked about earlier. By creating these specific operational roles, the Buddha effectively instituted the ancient equivalents of a catering manager and a property manager. Just brilliant.
And finally, Section 5, fine-grained management of the Sangha.
Now, of course, you couldn't just appoint anyone to these incredibly powerful new logistical roles. Managing the food and beds of hundreds of monks required some serious HR protocols. So the absolute crucial point here is that the Buddha outlined 5 very strict ethical and practical qualifications for anyone taking on a management role. A manager must not act out of desire, meaning, they can't hoard all the best stuff for themselves. They must not act out of anger or fear, meaning they won't punish rivals or bow to bullies like those 6-group monks. They must not act out of ignorance. And finally, they actually had to be competent. They needed to know exactly what had and had not been distributed. It was this really perfect blend of moral integrity and practical everyday inventory management. As the daily operations of these complexes grew, the roles became incredibly hyper-specific. I mean, you had the caretaker of empty monasteries, whose entire job was basically facility maintenance and greeting traveling monks. Then there was the manager of clothes, who was essentially an inventory specialist for all the donated robes. And let's not forget the timekeeper, who was responsible for striking the gong, keeping the daily schedule running smoothly, and even policing the dining hall to make sure everyone stayed quiet. And sometimes, these administrative challenges required some seriously outside-of-the-box solutions. There's this one fascinating anecdote involving King Bimbisara. He was visiting a monastery and was just completely shocked to see this highly respected elder, Mahakasapa, doing his own heavy physical labor, like literally treading mud for construction. The king promised to send workers to help, but he entirely forgot for 500 days. When he finally remembered, he felt terrible about it. But coincidentally, he had just captured 500 thieves who were sentenced to death. So instead of executing them, he pardoned them all, converted them into pure people, and assigned them to be the monastery's permanent groundskeepers and laborers. I mean, talk about a creative solution to a massive labor shortage.
All of this raises a really fascinating question. If a 2,500-year-old community used these exact, highly structured rules to maintain harmony, what can modern organizations learn from the Buddha's management playbook? It is truly amazing to realize that, whether it's an ancient monastery or a modern corporate office, the logistical challenges of running an institution, allocating resources, resolving petty roommate disputes, dealing with opportunists, are remarkably similar. The Buddha didn't just teach enlightenment. He taught highly effective, equitable management. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this totally changes how you view the practical reality of ancient history.